I'm not going to read it, but you know, I want you to scan it and ask me questions. I'm going to sort of just walk through the months, wing it. If anybody has questions, talk to me, ask, discuss, because this paper is not set in stone. There's a lot of variables because of what the weather might do. So I'm going to start in January. January is you need to be getting all your stuff ready for the spring, because in January I start throwing the feed to mine and add a box to the top of my single deeps. If you have double deeps, you might want to find out if your bees have moved up to the top box and rotate. This is why Tom's getting ready to make his brushy mountain run, so think ahead. My experience is if you wait until March, foundation is sold out, everything is sold out when it gets to be March and April. So getting ahead of the game would be a good idea. Anybody got any questions about January? So this month they're eating around 25 pounds a month, it looks like. So you always want to be walking around the back of your hives picking them up. If they need feeding, you got to figure out some way to get them in there. But right now is when you want to be packing the food in there. If you got a real light hive now, I'm not sure, but it could be time to bump it up to 2 to 1. I'm not sure, but I don't think they're drawing wax anymore. They're packing their food away. So if you've got behind on your feeding, you might need to bump it up to 2 to 1. I haven't bumped mine up yet. So, yep. So I'm in January. I'm in January and February. I mean, this is a variable thing here. You know, you can give or take 2 or 3 or 4 weeks according to if it has a warm winter, if it's snowing. But the bees are triggered by the sun. So what? December 12th, the sun starts heading back north, and they start laying again a little bit. And in January they start laying a little more, but they will not lay as much if you're not feeding them. So my thoughts is to start feeding them at the end of January and start adding boxes. Fondant, is that the right way to pronounce that word? Fondant, yeah. So in the wintertime, if they can't get to the syrup, you can make that fondant and push it. I've actually seen a video where the guy was like Play-Doh. You opened up the top of the hive and just squished it down between the frames, and they could get to it. And that had protein in it. And you know, the pollen is protein, so you have to get some kind of protein source to mix in with it. And there's a bunch of mixtures out there. Just I haven't got one here with me. And that is something to think about if you're behind on feeding, or if you just wake up and all of a sudden the bees, you know, are food. But they need pollen to raise their brood. Right now they're bringing in pollen, getting prepared for January. I've heard of some people putting pollen traps on their bees right now because they're really bringing it in. So,
I think the conclusion up here was that you came back to what's going on right now to prepare for January to make sure they had 25 pounds.
right. I was in January talking about.
Yeah.
So, right, sorry about that.
Pack it in now so they'll have the 25 pounds.
Yeah, you want to pack it in now. You know, when it gets to January, you still want to, even if you're packing it in now, you start feeding them in January and give them a second deep, or if they move up to the second deep, rotate boxes, they start laying brood and getting ready for the honey flow. It gives them a 2-month jump start. You want the hives to be packed full of bees at the end of March, so they can hop on the nectar. Questions? Okay, so
You said they tend to go to the top.
They will move to the top, you know, they're gonna go up
Right.
as they eat the honey.
Because
they'll
right
move
now,
up.
that's where they're putting their honey, on the top ones, right?
Right, the top should be full of honey and they should be in the bottom. And as they work their way through the honey, they'll move up. And actually, and if they're out in that bottom box, that's just a long hallway for them. So you'll put that on top. So now you're feeding them and they can continue to expand because usually they won't move back down.
Oh, so as the colonies get larger.
As soon as you
right.
start, and they will start laying brood in January. They'll start laying a little bit as the sun
So
starts.
you're putting like the empty one, well, what the,
The empty one on top. The bottom one may be in, not guaranteed. It depends on the bees. But if they have moved out of that bottom box and the brood nest is in the top box, definitely rotate it and start feeding.
The queen, as the way I understand, the queen won't go down to lay. They can actually swarm even though they've got a lot of room down below. Because they will, she has a tendency not to go down. She has a tendency.
because that's what was on my mind. It was in the summer though, I just swapped them because they still weren't doing anything in the bottom.
Right.
So the same concept.
Same thing. Yeah. A lot of us might be going through the winter with a single deep. So the only thing we have to do is put a second deep on there with foundation. And those sugar water to them. And by the end of March, they should be filled out and full of bees.
Kim, how warm would that be for you over here?
65 degrees. You know, you pop that stuff in here. Yeah, quick look. That don't mean you don't want to really be pulling the brood frames out.
If you're gonna switch out the
box.
box, don't do that until it's warm.
Well, so you're looking for a warm day. Keep an eye on the weather ahead. You know, I say 65 degrees,
No wind.
no wind, and just
There's not much focus out there right now, so anything, if you break the seal on top, it's hard for them to reseal it, so.
65 degrees. Don't be pulling the brood. You can, if you look down into your box, the bees are filling up the gaps. Where it's really tight looking, that's where the brood nest usually is. If you just pop off the top box, you just look down there and it looks really empty. Just go ahead and rotate it. Usually there won't be one frame of brood left at the bottom. I mean, they try to, it's sort of shaped like an egg inside in the middle of the pollen and the honey. And they'll just keep moving up. So, 1st of March, you know, it could vary 3 weeks. Depends on the weather and what the plants do. February, we have our red maple popping out. You cannot depend on that to feed the bees. That's the first, we have pollen year around here. Red maple is, I believe, the first new thing that pops out in February for them to work on. Don't depend on that to feed the bees. You still need to throw the sugar water to them until the main nectar flow hits. Because a strong hive of bees can eat 10 pounds a week in March. And a lot of experienced beekeepers have lost big hives by starvation. You know, you turn your back and 3 weeks later that 30 pounds of honey's gone, and then it gets cold, you can't get out and get any food, and you're not feeding them, they starve. And you just got a pile of dead bees. And then I hear a story every year from experienced beekeepers. So keep that in the back of your mind. Just keep picking up the back of the hive. I picked up the back of one of mine today and it felt light, but then I went to the front and picked it up, so apparently there's storing most of it in the front. So you might, you know, if you might lift it up from 2 or 3 different spots just to know. Make sure you don't let the paint fake you out. I've had the paint stick to my thing, and I thought they were heavy, and one day it broke loose and it was light as a feather. They taking me out for a couple months. And it will happen, so this is the major stuff. Any questions up through March? End of March, you need to be thinking about having your supers ready. The word is, when the nectar flow hits, they will not touch the sugar water. They will leave it alone. That's going to be your clue. The nectar flows on is when the sugar water stops dropping. And you can take that off, put your supers on. It varies the 1st of April to the 2nd or 3rd week in April as to when it hits. And when it hits hard, the hard hit lasts for about 3 weeks. You have a little bit early and a little bit later. There's like a 3 or 4 week period in there where they will just rock and roll. You can do anything with your bees in April. You can split them. Of course, if you split them, you're not going to get any honey. They may split themselves. So if you see them split themselves, that is a real good opportunity to go in there and use a queen castle. I've been in there before and found 4 or 5 frames with queen cells on them. They can do 20 or 30 queen cells in a hive, and you can sit there and just fill up a queen castle with those frames and have 4 new colonies. A colony is a queen and 300 bees. That's the official number for a colony. Rick Core, he teaches how to graft, and he'll take queen cell, a cup full of bees, and dump them into a maiden nuke. And that's how he starts his queens out. A cup full of bees, and make nukes like 6x6 box, like 4 frames in there. But queen castles, does everybody know what a queen castle is? A queen castle is a box the size of a deep. It's divided into 4 sections. Each section has 2 frames. So when you find your hive swarming, whether you catch them or not, you still can go into that box. If you go in there right then, there's probably queen cells in there that hasn't been messed with. And you take the queen cell, the frame of the queen cell, pot and a frame of pollen and honey, and then just leave them alone for 4 weeks. Go back in there and you should have some brood. I've learned not to cut my queen cells off my frames. Some people do. I really like for the bees to have 4, 5, 6 queen cells to choose from because they seem to always come out and do laying queen. That's my experience. My experience of cutting 1 queen cell off and putting it in a hive just didn't want to work for me. I can't even remember, like 1 out of 10 times it might have worked. Leaving 4 or 5, just leave all the queen cells on each frame. And you can go in there and pull the queen out and move her into another box with some frames. And they'll intentionally, they will draw out queen cells for you, but then you just hurt yourself when it comes to getting honey. Anybody got any questions on April?
In terms of supers, they're going to make money what? About how many millions would a strong hive fill up?
Well, if you're starting out with foundation, I would put 2 on there. If you got draw and comb, well, then they can really roll. So all you have to do is put the next one in there. So I would do at least 2. Because an average, I want to say the average is 100 pounds of honey per hive. It's a good colony. Of course, a lot that you get none from, and I've got 15 gallons from one before. Not sure how much weight that is. It's 180 pounds. Yeah. So, yep, the average for North Carolina is 100 pounds. So, if you got draw supers, I put 2 mediums on a hive before, and they fill them up in 8 days. That's that 3-week window there where them tulip poplars are wide open. The word is they can go land in one of those bulbs and fill up and head back to the hive. They don't have to go make a bunch of stops to get their load. So that's something you have to be prepared for, And you want to have a spare box for swarms because your bees are going to swarm no matter what you do. We don't want them to swarm. I had one swarm 4 times in 8 days last year, and it didn't even have the top box filled up. It wasn't drawed out, it wasn't, apparently it's packed full of bees as far as they were concerned, and got 4 hives, 4 new hives off that one box, and no honey.
One thing though, the 2 supers that you put on there, in this foundation, you don't put both supers of foundation on at the same time. You wait until they draw out, what is it, 80% of the super, then you put the second one on. You're using foundation, that's just what, that's what I've learned. Learned whatever it was, just experience. And then also Betsy Spencer, didn't she say last year that after April 1st, all the bees that are going to be laid that will contribute to the nectar for the honey collection will have been laid. But the eggs that will develop into those bees will have been laid. So you can split them.
What Susie's saying is,
Or remove the queen, I should say. You can remove the queen into something smaller and let them draw out another queen. That would keep them swarming also.
that's something that you can play around with. Like, say the 1st of March, the eggs that are laid the 1st of March will hatch out in 21 days, and then it's going to be 30 more days before they're foragers. So that would put it up towards the end of May. Those bees will actually be foragers, and that's what she's.
March 1st,
Well, April 1st.
April.
April 1st, if you pull that queen, it would be towards the end of May before those bees will be foragers. That's the reason we want to start in January, get as many foragers as we can. You know, and yes, you're packing your bees full of, your hives full of bees, and they might want to swarm, but just try to stay ahead of them with boxes. As Susie was saying, you might not want to put 2 supers on there before they fill at the bottom one. If it's foundation. So, personally, I like to put them on there so I ain't got to keep playing with them. You know, when it comes, I don't want to, I keep wanting to jump over here to August, but I'm trying not to. Okay, so we're in April right now, the honey flow's on, and you're adding boxes, and you're staying ahead of the game, and you got a spare box for when they do swarm. Anybody got any questions through April? So May, just let them roll. Just I've actually went in there and started pulling drop capped frames out and started extracting. I have a little 2-frame extractor, it's a hand crank. I think there's little gallon buckets you can actually get. But the reason I'm doing that is to get those strains back in there so they can fill them up again, so I can get as much honey as possible. So if it's capped the 1st of May, why not go ahead and take it out and extract it? Yes, I got to clean up the mess, but if I can collect about 10 frames, and that's 2 or 3 gallons of honey, depending on if it's mediums or shallows. So that's a little, if you're low on draw cone, you can, you know, start pulling it out and extracting it and putting them back in so they can fill them up again. Nope, because I'm trying to get honey. I've put all, you know, alternated draw, and I like to put frames in there where they'll draw the cone so I can get cut cone. And some of them won't even mess with those foundations or the cut cone frames. They'll just go ahead and fill up the ones they can. So if you're trying to get honey, you know, that's just it's extra work. It's another way of getting more honey. But at the same time, you want to build up your super collection because that's your key to getting a bunch of honey. It's going to take you 2 or 3. It's going to take you a couple of years to build up. But when you have, you know, if you got 1 hive and you have 3 draw supers, put them on there, you should really get them all filled up instead of them having to draw that wax out. It takes 9 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax, I believe.
The rest, well, I made this one in April, prime months.
April and May is the 2 prime months. my yard with about 15 or 20 hives, it's like sometimes it's a daily thing. I think at Baxter's, it was like 2 a day sometimes. So we have a whole bunch of hives. Just and notice they'll go to that same. They'll pick out a tree that they like because there's a limb that's hanging out like that. They'll pick out a favorite tree in their yard and just look out there in the morning and afternoon every day. Those 2 months at least, April and May.
Okay, so for the swarms, how much extra stuff do you think you need? Like, what do you plan on for? Like, if you have 5 hives, what should you expect to have extra equipment to get these swarms?
Just the bottom, top, and box with 10 frames. I love that, I try to save some drawed cones so when those swarms get in that box, they can start doing
It's
their
more
thing
like
right away. But they're ready to work. That swarm will draw out wax really, really quick. The swarms are in a whole different gear from a hive that's settling into their house. So if you have a box of 10 drawed cone, 10 frames of drawed cone, and you catch a swarm the 1st of April, you're going to get honey. I've gotten honey from swarms before, but they had a jump start with the drawed cone. Swarms are in a different gear. They're going to work, they're just working harder. They know they got to build a house from nothing.
So even if you put them in on a foundation or something, you just wouldn't expect the honey.
That's sort of a you don't expect honey from a swarm that same year, but if you got drawed cone, you might get some. And something about that swarm, if it's only one swarm from one hive, then chances are that's the old queen. So you need to keep an eye on that hive and maybe even try to mark her so you know who she is, and then plan on requeening. Because the old, and the hive supposedly will take care of that for us, but they don't sometimes.
They're a little bit slow and then you'll miss your season.
Say that again?
If they don't replace the queen right away, or a little bit slow at it, it would be good for them.
Oh yeah, the hive will not make it to the winter. But I'm going to keep jumping to the second part.
We'll get to August, I'm sure.
Just let us know when you do.
You got me. I'm aware of it now. Okay. So, we're in June right now, right? Everybody clear what's going on? So June is when you extract. For me, June is like the end and the beginning. And once you extract your honey, now you make your plan for the next year. Where do you want to be next June? How many hives are you going to have? Where do you want to be with your colony? So for me, I throw sugar water to them in July and August because there's nothing out there for them. They'll actually cut back on brood and the numbers will drop. But if you throw sugar water to them and build them up into a triple deep is what I prefer. 1st of September you split. And you can come out of one hive will turn into 3. And the perfect example is Kelly. She built hers up this summer into 2 triples, and then she turned around and split them, and now she's got 6 singles, right? So now she's set up in January to put 6 deeps on 6 hives and honey from 6 boxes. She tripled her numbers. That was your first time doing it? You did it by yourself? You had your husband Jerry help you, right?
Jerry, I had you.
You split yourself. I didn't come over there.
That's right, but yeah, but
You come over
you
here.
walked me through it and then I did it myself.
Yeah, you come to Tom's, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah, yeah.
We split Tom's. She saw how to do it over here at Tom's, and then went home and made herself 4 new hives, which is $600 worth of these.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
buy new.
yeah, Jerry and I did it.
So there is a way that you can expand your operation without spending. Okay.
So in June, say when you take your 2 or 3 supers off and extract them, you go back on top with a deep, with the third deep at that point to start building them up.
If I don't go to the mountains.
Right.
So some of us like to take the bees to the mountains to try to get some sourwood. So that's a little bit different game there. But the ones that are left here in Piedmont, you want to build them because when the food quits coming in June, they're going to cut back on feeding the queen her diet to have eggs. But if the food's coming in, I've actually wore the queens out by feeding them and feeding them and feeding them and feeding them. They laid and laid and laid and laid. And then she didn't even last, you know, like they're supposed to last 2 to 5 years, but now it's gotten to be where apparently the commercial beekeepers are requeening every hive every year. So the more you feed, the more she lays, the more eggs she uses, so she runs out of eggs sooner. So if you feed,
Reason I asked that, this was my first year having a decent amount of honey. Years before it had been like 1 gallon or half a gallon. So I had 4 or 5 hives with 3 supers of honey on them, 2 different kinds. And I made the mistake, this being my first time having that situation, when I took those supers off and extracted them, I left the supers off. I left those bees there. They had built up so many bees, I only left them with 2 boxes to live in. So I had hive swarm at that point. They didn't have space. So it would have been a good time to put a third deep. I didn't want to go back on with supers because the flow was over.
keeping that in mind, everybody hear what Rex said? He pulled his supers off, and his bees were really crowded, so they swarmed. That being said, my mentor, Dick Bell, he trained me to extract July 4th. And I figured out why. He didn't say why at the time, but they cut her off back in the 1st of June from laying a bunch of eggs. So by the time July 4th rolled around, the population was starting to go down. But they still will beard out on the porch, you know, hang down. That doesn't mean they're getting ready to swarm. That's just what they do. You know, to cool out, cool down. There's nothing for them to do inside. So a lot of foragers just droop down in front of the hive, look like a beard. But what Rex said is that, I mean, if you plan on wanting to split in September, we pull supers off, go to that next deep one there and start feeding them, and then 1st of September split. I'm going to jump ahead.
So Kim, when you do a split, when you do a split, are you just making one deep?
So if it's a triple deep,
Yeah.
what we were doing is taking the queen on a cat brood, pollen and honey, and building a box for her to live in. We did her cat brood. We wanted all the uncat brood to stay back at the original spot with the foragers. My experience is they were drawing like 20, 25 queen cells on 2, 3, 4 frames, depending on how many frames had the eggs on them. Then we'd go in there and take those, there would be 2 deeps left, and split those into two deeps. Now, we tried something different at times this year. We actually took and put 5 frames in a deep with 5 foundations. That's like a new. Now, the theory is, as long as it's foundation, the bees don't have to guard it from the hive beetles, the wax moths. And they'll slowly grow into that, into a deep. Now, when it comes January, you ain't got to pull them out of a new and stick them in a deep. You're set up to put a second deep on.
So you're going through the winter with just one deep, is that what you're saying?
Somewhere along the line, I read the bees don't like to bridge that gap between the 2 frames. They like to be in a ball, a tight ball. My observation hive, they will not bridge across the gap between the 2 frames. They're either balling on the 1st frame or the 2nd frame. And actually, they made a teardrop up to the super, the top frame last winter to get to the honey. They didn't move the whole colony up there. Having an observation hive is a very good tool to learn and see what the bees are doing out in your yard and your house. I've had mine for about 2 years now, and it's given me a lot of insight on what the bees are really doing. And I really think the bees are picking out their queens, you know. You know, the word is that the first queen out kills the rest, but I don't know. Just sort of still looking at that. Susie just took a frame of what, 6 queen cells and built 12. Put them in observation hive, and she sat there and took hourly notes for about 2 weeks. And she couldn't confirm that the queen did kill the queen cells, but she saw the bees hauling out the queens that were still white larvae, they were hauling them out. So, and they got the queen is just laid wide open. Now, all these hives we split 1st of September are full of brood. All the ones we didn't split, they ain't got no brood. Which is okay, because they're getting prepped for the winter. But I just thought that was real interesting that the ones we split were full of cat brood, and the ones we didn't split, they knocked down their numbers, you know, ready for the winter. That being said, if you plan on putting an observation hive into fair, that would be a good way to get prepped for it. Tell our secrets. So
You just don't want to do it in a rainstorm.
Yeah, we did it in a rainstorm the other day. When I was going to go do the community center thing the other night, I closed my observation hive off that morning and went back that afternoon. I was getting ready to load it up. And I took the cover off and looked down, and they were all looked like they were dead at the bottom, just piled up. Just crumbs. I thought they were dead. So I just went ahead and unhooked them, let them start moving around and flying, and they came back to life. I caught them before they died. Now what triggered that, I don't know, because I've done that many times before, blocking them up, taking them places. But Steve just happened to have been, we were going out to pull his frames for the fair that day, and we did it like 30 minutes before the thing started at the community center, and it was raining. And so we just barely pulled that thing off for the 70th night out by pulling, and his hive was not one that was split, but it had a little brood in it. Just thought I'd tell that story. Did I confuse anybody?
I'm going to mention something too. This business about overwintering single deeps. I've never done that before. I've always had a medium or honey on top or double deeps or whatever. But when that, and I'm not saying what's better to do, but when that Bear guy was here, remember Bear Crop Science guy was here, we asked him, what is your overwintering percentage? And he said 100%. And that, I mean, most people lose 30% of their hives over the winter because of whatever, mites and viruses or whatever. And so he said what they do is they go in with single deeps, honey bound. So they basically feed those bees until they just can't store any more honey. But then they start feeding them again in February or in January, like Tim was talking about. So just keep that in the back of your mind. That's just what he said about that. That they had 100% survival with single deeps that were honey bound. And also, it depends on just the bees. Because last year, Tim had this new that had 2 little frames of bees on it. He had a screen bottom board on it. He fed all winter, right, with syrup. March 1st, he called me and said, you want a project. March 1st, he brought it over to my house, but there was not a cell of brood in it. There was not a cell of honey, nothing. Just those 2 frames of bees. And they blew up into a double deep and out of control bees by June. So you just never do know. And that's all that went through the winter on that. So this business about overwintering a whole lot of bees in double deeps, I just don't know.
So talking about that screen bottom, bees that have go through the winter on screen bottoms, they tend to move up farther. They have to use more honey to stay warm because they got to use more fuel to create more heat. And for some reason they start laying later. As soon as I got them out of that nuke into Susie's solid bottom, she started laying. Right? So I'm really on the fence about screen bottoms, you know, and just sliding that little thing up under there. that might count a little bit, but I think they want a sealed chamber so they can control the airflow more. You know, when it's a sealed box and they have a little entrance in the front, a little entrance at the top, they can control it more. When they got that big screen bottom, they can survive. They will not freeze. They'll starve before they freeze. So yes, the screen bottoms are working, but could the bees do better without it? That's something you get to figure out in your own yard. My yard, I'm starting to push away from because inside of the tree, you know, they have a 2-inch hole. All the air goes in that hole and out that hole. So, and the screen bottom was made up just for mites. It wasn't for extra ventilation. It was just so the mites would fall through, go to the ground. I don't know if that's, you know, that might be helping a little, but, you know, long story short is, if you got a mite problem, you need to treat it. You know, the breaking the brood cycle in the fall, that's been what I've been using, and you know, I think Tom has used a little bit of chemicals this year on some of his ones that had the old queens in there, because the old queens, when you move the old queen to split, they didn't have a breaking brood, so their mite count is still growing. If you don't do something in that hive, it won't make it. It won't make it long. 2 years is about it for a hive that you don't do nothing to. The mites live 70 days, the bees live 40, 50 days. So after a while, the mites just take over the bees.
I split my hive in September. Is it too late for you to put checkmate on the old one with the old queen in?
I need to go read the instructions myself. That's something I'm thinking this week too. There's so many.
Is it too late in the year to put checkmate on the half that has the old queen still?
I didn't use question, that's all I'm asking.
So different chemicals have different instructions. Some of them are 45 days, some of them are a week. And I am not educated on the.
And there's also minimum temperatures for the particular chemicals, minimum and maximum temperatures, so you got to read that. But if you use something like a 7-day treatment, I think it's got to be 50 degrees or above for during your daylight hours. So there's, you know, specifics that you need to read on the container.
Mite Away Quick Strips is a 7-day treatment. I can tell you that. And like you said, your temperatures need to be between 50 and 95. So we're not going to get anyone 95 probably, but we might go below 50 at night. So.
But it's daylight hours.
It's daylight.
Is it daylight? Okay.
Yeah, so it came dipped
Well, it's a good time to do Mite Away Quick Strips.
Yeah.
One treatment's a week.
And I think you can leave the strips on.
Under 3 weeks, is it 3 weeks in a row?
One time. Mite Away Quick Strips.
Is it, would you change it before the
That's some nasty stuff.
Or
Gloves and your mask and your.
So we're talking. So I'm trying not to jump around. We're towards the end of the summer now, so we're getting prepped for the winter. We're about where we are right now. Last year I had a screen bottom and I tried to slide that little thing up there and I come out the next day and there's a bunch of dead bees. I had went in there and messed up their ventilation. They had it set up for the winter, probably what they wanted. I thought I was going to help them out in January when it was snowing or whatever, and that was the wrong thing to do. So set your bees up right now for how they're going to go through the winter. You're going to use a solid bottom, stick it on there now so they can get settled in and used to it and doing their stuff, you know. But I don't even think about changing it in December or January or February. So if you're going to do it, you need to do it this month. And that's a good experiment. You know, you get to see what the difference is coming out of the winter. You know, it's like we were talking a while ago. You know, they do act. There has to be a difference. You know, because just like our house, the colder it is, the more fuel we have to use to keep it heated. The more honey they have to use to keep their cluster warm. You know, if they got a screen bottom. So just sliding that little thing up under the bottom. I don't consider that turning it into a solid bottom. Because actually now you just give a place for hive beetles to go down there and get away from the bees and tease them. You know. They can crawl through that little screen bottom back and forth. When they got a solid bottom, they have nowhere to hide. And them bees will fill the beetle gel and keep them contained and feed them. Or if you got a beetle trap, they'll chase them in there and they'll drown. And there's other ways, you know, to take care of the hive. But I believe that screen bottom actually gives them some room to play with bees. And I don't think the bees like walking on the screen bottom. That's just my thoughts. What?
They lose their time.
Oh yeah, they lose pollen. I mean, you know, they're working all this hard work bringing pollen in, and a lot of it drops off. And once it drops off through the screen, then you got your ants picking up on it, and whatever else is down there cleaning up after the bees. Because there's stuff out there. Bees drag out stuff every day, and then there's stuff that comes along and takes them. And the ants, the yellow jackets. So the screen bottom, they just come up with that in the 90s, I believe, just because of the mites. It's not been around for that long.
It's an old thing that used to do way back when we got away from.
What, screen bottom?
Screen bottom, they were around a long time. Beekeepers just got away from it, held them back.
So why did they have them before?
Not sure.
So the mites come in the mid-80s. I tell you why some people needed a screen bottom. Tom and I and Steve took some bees to the mountains a couple of years ago. And he had 2 humongous hives, and the truck broke down, and they suffocated. Killed it. We meant to do it all at night. We got stuck in the sunlight and 2 double deeps. It didn't take long. It was just a bad deal. So the screen bottom and the screen moving top, if you're moving bees in the daylight. So that's a definite must if you're going to be moving bees around in the daylight. A lot of pollinators don't like to use the screen bottoms because they're moving them and they get ripped. A pollinator probably has a solid bottom. It's just, that's what the pollinators that I know
Tim, one thing we missed in June, when he mentioned a while ago about pulling the supers off, when you get the honey out, you need to cover what they need to do with those supers so they can use them again the next year.
Right, so when you pull your supers off and you extract the honey, if you got a lot of beehives, you probably want to put them back on the boxes and let them clean them out, and then take them off and store them. You want to store them on something that seals at the bottom and seals at the top. And you put a little tin pan with wax moth crystals, not mothballs.
For the record, do not think you can get a plastic cereal bowl and have it suffice. The crystals will eat through a plastic bowl.
Yep.
I use newspaper.
Or from Brushy Mountain, you can buy that Paramount.
Like newspaper.
Paramount.
Right.
Hey, Tim.
5-pound container and a small container. Yeah, which one you want to buy?
Either
That'd
way,
be
you
something
got.
else Tom would probably won't carry.
You can put them in the freezer.
Yeah, if you got
You got room.
freezer space.
So
That would
our-
stop them from coming in later. If you really want
Do
to.
what?
But that would stop them from coming in later if you freeze it.
You talking about keeping it in the freezer all the way to next spring?
No, what I do is I put them in the freezer for a couple of weeks to cook the eggs, and then just seal them up in one of those huge Ziploc bags and keep them in the house.
You never had any problems?
No problems.
Talking about brood frames or?
No, she's talking about supers.
No, she said kill the eggs.
Well, in case it has wax cloth or house beetle eggs in there. You can put frames in a storage container, it looks perfectly fine, and you come back 2 weeks later and the larvae's just torn all to pieces.
So what we do real quick is that we take, when we spin out the frames, we put the frames back on the hive, let the bees clean out whatever they want to clean out of them. Bring the frames back out, put them in the freezer. We went on Craigslist, found a free freezer. Put them in the freezer for 2 days minimum, but sometimes 3 weeks, but you know, whenever you get to it. Whenever the freezer gets full, then you pull them out, and then we put them in a tote, and then we put saran wrap over the tote, not saran wrap, what is it, cling wrap? I don't know, whatever, the clear stuff over the top of the tote, put the lid back on it, then that goes into a container we got off Craigslist. It was a shipping container, so it's kind of a big thing, but we threw them in a room enough for about 8 totes. And then we take those crystals that you buy from Walmart that are the blue.
The Walmart vacuum cleaner section.
Yeah.
In a blue and white can.
I put those, I dump those into a sock, I tie the sock off, I hang it in the thing, and then I seal the whole thing up. And then it's good until the next year.
We do that so that the fumes from the crystals aren't actually getting into the frames, but it's driving out because we're keeping it into like, it's a larger shipping container. It keeps all of any wax moths from going into the container. We already know, since we froze them, that we don't have anything that's living inside of the foundation or the comb. And so we just want to keep it outside. So by keeping it outside, still in the container, but not inside where any of that gas and the fumes might actually seep into the wax and then be transferred to honey later. And it has worked phenomenally for us.
And if you do that, you want to take the frames out and give them a chance to air out before you put them back on the hive.
How long? How long do you have to let them air?
2 weeks. That's a good question.
Well, if you pour your wax moth crystals into the frames and just let it trickle down to the bottom, probably 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's how I started out and learned, but I like it.
The way we do it, you can use it the next day.
Yeah, I mean, the way Steve's doing it, you don't have that. But I like tin pan and just get it up there, and I think the fumes actually go down. And you don't want to have a chimney effect. You know, you want this thing to be sealed off.
One thing we do different here on that, Tim, is that with the picnic table out back, when we did the extraction, we would just, instead of going and putting them back on the hives, we set them up here on the side, and that picnic table was a good thing because the bees had a serious picnic right there. And I think all your bees were up here bringing beer, I think, because everybody around was coming out. And then but same thing with the extractor. It was, instead of trying to worry about getting all the honey off of that, just when we set it all out there under cover, but actually the frames weren't, and give them a couple of days with it, and it's all clean. The honey's been cleaned up, then you can shake it out and go and do with it.
So I had that method work, and then I've had that method not work.
Some people will stack hives and crisscross them and just get them under a shelter, but
what I've had happen was we had thousands of bees die one year when we set out the frames for them to clean out the frames. They were all fighting from all sorts of different hives. Most of them were just fighting, and so when I pulled the frames away, there were thousands of dead bees on the surface. And that was the last year we did that. So then we just said,
but ours is around the campfire, never seen Kumbaya.
Well, that's true. Kumbaya does it every time. But that's why we put them specifically on the hives, because then that way that one hive will be just working that one box.
Yeah, if like Steve, if you got a bunch of hives, you put them out in the yard, they're gonna fight. So if you got 1 or 2 hives, it probably won't be no big deal. Just set them out there and let them clean them. Like Tom's, his is across the woods, a couple hundred yards away. That's probably why I've done mine in the yard, which was 40 yards from the beehives, and just killed each other trying to get to it. Any more questions on how to store your supers? So we got up to September to where we're splitting, and we're here in October now to where we've made sure our splits worked. The queen is in there, she's laid some, and they're getting ready for the winter. I was told you need to have double deeps going through the winter, and since then I've learned different. Like Susie said, there was a nuke of bees that went through the winter on 2, 3 frames, and they knew how to manage themselves to make it, sure. And once they got away from that screen bottom and had food coming in, she just went to town. And she was a young queen from the fall before, so she just went to town. I think that's pretty neat to know and do, especially if you're a hobbyist and you don't want to go out and spend your money on queens and dupes and packages every year. You can just learn to keep your own going and split them, keep growing.
Spend on sugar though.
Yeah, but you make enough honey to sell, and if you catch yourself getting too many hives, don't cut back. Turn around and sell them, get some sugar money. Carson Webb, I can't keep getting all these hives. I got too many, but he figured out he could turn around and sell them, and then pay for a sugar habit. So, and you might catch yourself getting too many. I think Steve, they got over 30, probably over 20 swarms this past year.
It was a lot.
It's like, I think they intentionally made them swarm because I just couldn't believe.
We just let them.
It was like they had a
we had
factory going
a
on.
talk. They said, "Hey, we want to go." So, okay.
And where you live, you have different vegetation. What's going on over there around the community center? I don't know what's over there, but there's a lot of nectar over there. In my house, it's a little bit different, and Achilles' house is different. Kelly was copying Steve because all of a sudden she found out, whoa, she had starving. Yeah, her bees were starving because she was feeding them a quart a week. Or a pint a week. It wasn't much. But, that's, as long as you're aware, just pick up the hive and don't, just because Steve or Tim or somebody's not feeding their bees or feeding their bees, you need to know what's going on in your yard.
So, when you're taking all of your honey off in June or whenever, the bees don't have anything. And you think, oh, it's summer, they're out there, they're collecting nectar and stuff, but really there's a dearth in the middle of summer. Depending on where you live, of course. But I'm just saying that if you take all the honey off the hive, you've got to be careful. You do have to feed them in the summer if you've taken everything from them. They stored all their honey up in that super, not down below, and you take that super off, they have nothing. So that was, I just want to mention that as far as July. It comes into play here too, as far as making sure they have enough.
The people that live in the city probably got a lot more nectar going on because everybody's planting plants in the yards. Notice that. Bill, you probably, there's no telling what you got over there.
What's the weight for like a deep frame, like cat? Do you know?
Say
Or
8
what
to
do
10
you-
pounds.
Per frame or the whole deep?
The whole deep frame full of honey.
About 80 pounds, yeah, it's heavy.
8 to 10.
About a gallon
Because this is my first bees. I had bought 2 packages in May, and I noticed one hive. This last warm spell in June or whatever, the one hive didn't seem as active on the outside. And I opened it up, and there was a bunch of cat brood and stuff. But they had 9 frames on the top, completely cat, of honey and stuff. I was just curious what that converted to weight, because you're saying these weights, what they use per thing, it's double bees, So,
A deep is very heavy if it's full of honey.
yeah, that top box was up there.
I would say they're 80 to 100 pounds if they're full.
So it seemed encouraging that they had that, even though I was sweet.
Yeah, and that's something to think about. Some bees like make a bunch of bees and swarm. Other bees like to collect honey, stay at home. So those,
Would you be concerned? The one thing I didn't see a bunch of small bees at the time towards the end of September. Would that be normal sometimes, or like the eggs? I mean, or larvae.
say it again.
When I opened up the hive, it's toward the end of September or whatever. I looked, a bunch of capped frames, probably 2 capped frames in the bottom. It's 2 deeps, you know. But I didn't notice as many eggs or like when I had it earlier in the summer. So they're kind of tapering off at that time. So that would be sort of
That's
normal, not alarming, you know.
Right, that's what they do this time of year. They cut back and cut down to nothing. My observation hive didn't have one bit of cat brood or larvae in there a week and a half ago. I hadn't fed them since March. And when they all played dead on the other day, I could tell that there was nothing in the halls and the honey, you know, their food was going down. So I popped the feeder on there. She's laying. She started to lay about 2 or 3 days ago. So feeding them triggers them to lay or not lay. If you don't feed them, they're not going to lay because the food.
And that's why I kind of tapered off.
Yeah, I mean the bees. You can control. You can manipulate the bees by feeding them, which means you're going to use up the queen faster. But you know, you just know you want to split and get new queens every year. I save my old queens until you know they just don't want to go no more. You don't want to just do away with them. But they're not doing as good. I mean, it's really, you're wasting your time. I had one box, they just, for a year and a half, they wouldn't do nothing. I just didn't mess with them. I think they would clean themselves, but I just let it go just to see what they would do. So if you got good queens, they're going to blow up your hive. You will get honey and have a bunch of bees. If you got a queen that's not a good layer, you need to do something different. I have pulled a queen out that was not a good layer, and they drew queen cells and raised a good queen out of her eggs. So, you know, they say go out and buy yourself another queen if you're almost not doing good, but I've experimented and got them to raise queen off the queen that wasn't doing good, and ended up with a good queen.
Tell them also, Tim, that the bees that produce them now are different than the spring bees. The worker bees, it's a winter crop of bees and a spring crop of bees. They live longer in the winter. The winter bees live longer than the springtime bees. Am I right?
Yep, they live about 3 or 4 months versus 6 weeks in the spring.
Yeah.
6 weeks is about as long as they live. 3 or 4 months in the winter.
That's because they're not flying, though. That's my understanding.
It's a different bee. It's a different bee.
Not
That's tricky. She's seen them not fine, but it still is different bee.
It just was interesting because too, that just when I observed it on the outside, it didn't seem as busy, but when I pulled it out, there's a ton of bees. So it's the opposite.
All right.
Question for you. So wax moths. I've had a bunch of wax moths in my house. So I pulled out all the frames, the moths, and all it. Put them in the freezer. Where I get from there.
Well, how bad was the frame tore up? Bad. Basically, I guess you just go in there and cut all that out.
Throw it away.
Goes away.
Yeah, there is some honey left on the outside.
The state will repair that?
Now, the wax moths laying eggs, some cells in the egg hatches out. There's the larvae.
The wax moths lay eggs, the hive beetles lay eggs, and usually that won't happen unless your hive is weak. The key to not having wax moths is to have a hive packed full of bees. Of course, now you might get a hive to swarm, so it's like a little dance. You got to find that little line with the wall, and there's no exact line, you know. But a packed hive will be a healthy hive.
They're pretty well packed. I've lost it by the months.
Well, the mites open the door to other problems. Once the mites get in there, they just that's what starts everything else wrong. That weakens the bees, and the scent is out there in the air. The hive beetles can. I think I've heard the hive beetles can sense a weak hive 2 miles away. So having a little basically, you got to make sure you got a bunch of bees in your hive. And if you don't, you break it down to where they're tight. Get rid of all that draw comb because they can't manage it. And them high beetles get over there and just have a party. And if the wax moths get in there, that's when you're really going to have problems. I mean, they can manage the high beetles a little bit, the wax moths.
You still have a queen in there?
I don't think so. We couldn't find any eggs.
Yep, most of the time when that happens, the queen nest is what it's called.
Yeah, wax moths, they won't go into a hive that's kicking, that's doing good, a healthy hive. They won't do it. Wax moths, they come in and finish the job. They finish it off.
Unless they run super stacked out, unless there's, not enough bees to cover all the supers.
After the honey flood, you gotta make sure you got enough bees to cover the draw frames or other stuff. The way I understood it was, it's like, if you have a castle, there's no way you can keep the whole thing clean, so now you feel overwhelmed and you can't even really keep one room clean. But if you ever, keep them to where they got a tight area to keep clean and controlled, there's something about the way they act. They act different. 'Cause I put 2 nukes into our club hives up here in front of Tom's this spring, and I put 2 nukes into 2 double deeps. They just couldn't handle it. It was just too much. I should have just put them in there and let them, and put foundation and let them grow into it. And I gave them all that draw cone. It just overwhelmed them, and they just went downhill. 2 good nukes just went straight downhill once I put them into all that area to try to manage. So to me, the key is don't give them more draw cone than the bees can cover. And just put the foundation on the outside and they'll grow into it. And that's the way to keep control of how much area the bees have to manage. So I put the foundation instead of draw cone. Well,
Did we get that one?
pretty much. We got all the way up to October, and October was, where we were. September was splitting month, and October is when you're just making sure you got them set up for the winter. You got your body, you got your ventilation like you want. Get your ventilation like you want it this month. If you're gonna treat now. I don't think you need to put it off anymore if you're gonna treat. And the ones you probably need to think about treating are the ones that have old queens that came from last year. If you got a swarm or something, this summer, they probably don't have a mite build up that's big yet. But if you got a hive that's a year old, I would say it's build up with mites, and you should do something. Sugar roll would confirm it. Usually, a hive that's a year old, the mites are starting to gain ground. Next, coming out of the winter and spring, it's not going to be a good thing. November, you pretty much don't do nothing. I mean, you monitor the food in November and December. Just filling up and making sure they got their food, to make sure they got their weight, you got the ventilation like you want it, not going in and out of the hive none.
Clean up your woodware that you're getting ready to use in January, February.
Yeah, and that's the reason, Tom's getting ready to make a run to brushy, so it's a good time to get your stuff now to get prepped for the season instead of waiting. I've seen a lot of people wait until March and April and everybody's sold out. So try to stay ahead of the game. Have a plan and stay ahead of the game, and don't go into your hive without being real clear on your intention. Why am I going in here? Just not go in there for a sunny look around. You only go in there because you're looking for something. There's a reason you're going in there. I believe Tarky said once every 2 months is planted. But then again, he said every time he would do a sugar roll, just to know how many mites are in there. Is everybody familiar with Pat Waggle newspaper? David Tarby from NC State has got this new thing going. Is that what it's called?
Waggle.
The Waggle. And every 3 months he has a new
good.
He has a new newspaper or article or something come out, and this year he challenged everybody to do 3 different mic treatments, like do different, just do something on your hives, and don't do nothing on one of them, and then turn into the results. It's a little challenge for everybody that was wanting to do it. And I think his point was just to see you cannot not do nothing about the mice. It's just like our dogs and cats. They get fleas, you got to do something. You're just going to be overwhelmed with them. All right. Anybody got?
What are your thoughts about cross-wire on the frame?
Say that again?
Wire on the frame.
It's, for the brood frames,
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. It's a lot of extra work. It's a good idea. Nope, this past year I just cut the old wax out, and they got these little plastic bars, 2 plastic bars you can put through there, and the bees will draw the wax down and buy these 2 bars, and they'll actually hold it in. So now I figured out how I can just like have a draw frame with cone, blank, draw, alternate it, and they'll draw that wax down in April. Not now, don't do that now. There's a certain time of year you can do things and you can't do things. And these bees will draw wax whether there's a foundation there or not. And they will keep their 3/8 inch bee space. So you can get them to draw your deeps, but that wiring just secures it. I mean, that's like double insurance that thing's not going to fall apart on you. So, I'm definitely, that's a good idea. But when you get a whole bunch of hives going on, you try to figure out shortcuts.
You also use nails, I use nails. Inch and 3/4 roofing nails, and you got the wax underneath. One of those nails on that side and another on that side, and then on the other end, do the same thing. It just holds their tension. I've done that for 3 or 4 years.
So,
those little pins that you buy from Russian Magic, they're too aggravating. You can't spread them things to get them over the wax, but doing the nails, it doesn't take that much time. It does hold it.
And if they go ahead and draw it out, that's good. But if those frames sit in there undrawed for a while and get warm and they start warping on you, now when they do finally draw them out, one side has a hole about a 1/4 inch deep, the other side is about 1 inch deep. So now that sort of messes them up. So having all that wire keeps that foundation straight. I believe you bought about 300 or 400 frames, and they all have that foundation that's, I can't remember,
It's on a plastic core with wax on
it's
inside.
plastic with wax, and it stays straight.
If they have a choice, they'll definitely do a wax foundation. And I slip the black one in there. They never touched it. It's like
I've gotten solid plastic frames before. I mean, no wood at all, and took melted wax and a paintbrush, and I put wax on there, and it was super. And then it threw them out real pretty. And I think what Tom has got actually has wax on there, but
Yeah, it's wax on each. I mean, it's a wooden frame with it's a white or yellow plastic core with wax on each side. It's just.
And the beauty behind that is you don't have to put nothing together and the thing stays straight. That's the good thing about that setup. There's many different ways you can go there. Any more questions about the 12 months of beekeeping? Everybody knows that each month is definitely different, and you just can't stick them out there and think they're going to take care of yourself. On the back side of these papers I gave you, there's some beekeeping myths. You're a bad beekeeper if you have to feed your bees. And there are some beekeepers out there that say you shouldn't have to feed your bees if you don't pull a honey. Well, this is not true. Just like what Dick Rogers was telling us. Bees need feed. So don't think you don't have to feed your bees. I'm not going to go through this list. It's just little bitty things about this that people talk about that aren't necessarily true. We've gone way over our time tonight, so if nobody else has a real important question, we're going to shoot on to the door prizes. Has everybody got a door prize ticket?